Hey there, this is Natalie, and in this video I am going to be telling you the Ayamatsu If story, though just bear with me a moment while I explain how these side story videos are going to be. Originally I actually wasn't going to do the If routes, because I really feel like Echidnut's If videos do such a good job of presenting these stories that just retelling them would be a bit redundant. But since so many people keep asking me to do If route videos, and they really are cool stories I'm going to have an interesting time working on, I've decided that what I'm going to do is a pair of videos for each route. The first one telling the story, and then a second one analysing what we can find out from the If story in question that may give us hints or clues about the canon story, or new information about characters. Naturally, the If routes are alternate timelines where nothing that happens is canon, but they do allow us to see some things we don't see in the canon route, but which would still be true regardless, or to learn things about characters Subaru gets closer to in the If stories than he does in the canon route. So, if you just want to enjoy the Ayamatsu Pride If story, you're in the right place. But if you want to overthink the hell out of it with me afterwards, particularly what the ending could mean, there will be a video for that released soon after this one. I'll be summarising the story in my own words here, except for any dialogue, which is taken from the Witch Cult Translation's English translation of the story, which you can find a link to in the description if you want to read it. And you should if you like this story, because I can't include every line in detail here. Before I start, the spoiler threat level for the Ayamatsu If story if you're anime only is... well, there's a big Arc 5 spoiler about the Sin Archbishop of Greed, and a smaller Arc 4 spoiler about Elsa, which at the time of writing will be revealed fairly soon in the anime anyway. But before these spoilers, I'll give you a chance to skip ahead to a later timestamp if you want to avoid them. It is possible to get the gist of the story without the Elsa detail or the Regulus scene, so you can hopefully still enjoy the story this way, but I'm leaving these bits in because they're cool. Now, this story is one where Natsuki Subaru breaks bad, and there's a lot of dark stuff in it. That's not a warning or anything, it's really only as dark as the main ReZero story can be in places. It's just, you know, if the idea of Subaru being behind the horror disturbs you, particularly the idea of him treating some other characters badly, well, it's time to steel yourself, because you're about to meet the twisted bastard our usual hero can become if one small failure on his very first day in the ReZero world leads to his sanity coming undone. Here, but by the grace of Reinhard, goes Subaru. This is Ayamatsu. Ayamatsu begins with the end of Subaru's first death loop in the ReZero world. He's being killed by Elsa. Briefly, we see his thoughts on this. Subaru experiences the terrible pain of death and thinks mainly that it isn't fair. Not that he doesn't deserve this kind of punishment for the kind of person he is though, but more that a lot of other people probably deserve it just as much, and so why is it his alone to bear? He dies, and he returns by death to the Upper Man. This is where we discover just what a veteran this Subaru is, despite never having progressed beyond the loot house. He scratches a tally into the ground calmly, no sign of the freaking out that we see him do in this spot in the normal route. This is the 88th time he's arrived here, so he's been killed either by Elsa or the alley thugs 87 times. We can deduce then just where this story changed from the one we know. While we don't know exactly how many times it took for him to turn into the person we see now, we know that this Subaru never called for help in the alleyway, and so never made friends with Reinhard, and never had his help against Elsa. He chose instead to Dark Souls the alley fight, dying again and again until he knew the moves of the three thugs perfectly, and could dispatch them with no need to call for help. He thought he was destined to do the same with Elsa, and find a way to beat her through trial and error, but nothing works. The difference in strength is just too great. In the process of reliving and learning this fight over and over, and yet still never being able to get past Elsa, Subaru's mental state has degraded a lot. He could just avoid the alley fight altogether with his knowledge from the other loops, but he doesn't. Perhaps just being able to get past these guys reliably now gives him the only sense of having achieved something through all of these deaths. He shows them no mercy, beating, strangling, and crushing the necks of the 3 men in under a minute and leaving them dead. But there's no question that Subaru won't try to stop Elsa. Despite his repeated failures, he is certain that what he has to do is save the silver-haired girl who has had her insignia stolen. Yes, despite the fact that in 87 tries, he hasn't even discovered that her name is not, in fact, Satella. The kindness she showed him in that very first loop moved Subaru to want to save her. And so he finds her where he knows she always is. And after she runs past him in pursuit of Felt, failing to notice him at all, he promises that he will save her. In this attempt, he's finally decided to try something new. After giving an anonymous tip-off to the city guards, Subaru hides on a rooftop in the slums to see if they can take Elsa down. But it's here that he truly learns that Elsa is not just strong compared to him and to the people he's fought her with, but that she's insanely strong for this world, as well as having a perverted, monstrous enjoyment for killing. As she slaughters the guards with delight, Subaru is reminded of legends of women who bathed in the blood of virgins to remain young, of vampires. This is how Elsa looks to him, the ultimate predator in this world, who surely nobody could defeat. But that's when Reinhard appears. He looks at first to Subaru like a pillar of flame, but as that hallucination clears, he sees a knight, with what's described as a beauty that transcends gender. Outside, surrounded by all the blood and bodies of the guards Elsa has already slayed, Reinhard and Elsa exchange their intentions, with her saying that it would be cruel to both of them if he held back and didn't fight her to the death, and Reinhard agreeing that as a knight, in light of her crimes, he shouldn't show her any mercy. As in the canon loop, Reinhard can defeat Elsa without drawing his legendary dragon sword Reed, which can only be drawn against an opponent it deems worthy. Though Reinhard isn't limited at the start of the fight as he is when this fight happens in the normal route, because Emilia is not here using magic. We'll find out where she is shortly. Elsa escapes badly wounded, just as she does in the canon route, but she's thoroughly defeated, and Subaru is awed by how easily this Reinhard was able to do something that he had failed at 87 times. Subaru finds himself crying. He doesn't know why, but all of his frustration at the unfairness that someone like Reinhard could exist leaves him in tears. The whole scenario played out without Subaru, the one with this strange power to return by death, doing anything more than talking to the guards. The impression Reinhard makes on Subaru in this moment is something that will stick with him all the way through this route. Subaru now decides that he's going to need to use other people if he wants to break through any future stalemates, having been so thoroughly unable to get past Elsa, and now aware that there are even stronger people in this world. He takes the opportunity to help the badly wounded Elsa to escape, bribing slum dwellers to turn a blind eye. He makes it very clear to Elsa that he's only doing this so she'll owe him a favour, and he makes her give him a way to get in contact with her, something he will be doing rather frequently in this story. He does, however, promise that he will kill her someday, and Elsa can sense the hatred coming off of him. Strange times call for strange alliances, however. The next detail is a Season 2 spoiler, so if you want to avoid it, skip ahead now to the time shown on the screen. Now, when Subaru is helping Elsa to escape, she only needs his help to get to where the character she calls her sister, Mei Li, is waiting for her. Mei Li is the Beastmaster who was behind the Witch Beast dogs, the little blue-haired girl who we saw in Arc 2, though it isn't revealed that that is who she is, or that she's connected to Elsa until she's involved in the attacks on the mansion in Arc 4. It is interesting to know that Mei Li was close by during these events in Arc 1, because she would have been there in the canon route too. Subaru's alliance with Elsa in Ayamatsu also means he works closely with Mei Li, and actually almost has a kind of friendship with her. His conversations with her are far closer to conversations Subaru and Mei Li have in the main route than his interactions with any other characters in the Ayamatsu route. She does reveal in a later scene that she did have friends other than Subaru, including someone Subaru has never heard of named Petra, but that she killed them all, which probably means that the Witch Beast attack on the village children still happened in this route, but that without Subaru there investigating the mystery, the children weren't saved. Now, I'll say this bit now, even though it comes later in the story, just so I can avoid having too many skips for spoilers, but Meili is present in the Ayamatsu route right up until the final scene, when she's killed. Though her pet witch beast, the Shadow Lion or Guilty Law, that is probably the same one seen in Arc 4, who even has his own POV chapter in the web novel, remains loyal to her even after she dies, and is what carries Subaru to face Emilia at the very end. Emilia kills this good boy with an ice spear, though she doesn't really have a lot of choice. Okay, so back to the spoiler-free part of the story. Subaru, having secured a way to contact Elsa, goes to see what happened to Rom, Felt, Emilia and Puck, while Elsa was kept busy with the guards and Reinhard. He finds that the loot house has been frozen, which, having seen her magic in previous tries, he realises the girl he still calls Satella and Puck must have been responsible for. He learns from a slum dweller that Rom and Felt have been arrested. We don't find out what happens to them next, but we can assume by the fact there are still 5 royal selection candidates announced later that while she's being held by the guards, Felt is somehow identified and still ends up a candidate. This is the point where Subaru makes contact with the witch cult. He has sensed the cultists watching him for a while now, presumably drawn by his growing insanity. He has no real goal anymore, knowing that the situation with the insignia was resolved and the girl he was fixated with saving is safe, and so he doesn't know what he's supposed to do in this strange new world now with this ability. He considers that he made a mistake, that he should have used the opportunity talking to Elsa to find out why she wanted the insignia, to find out more about Satella. But this is the only loop where the girl he wanted to save survived, and he feels it would be inefficient to throw it away and cycle through who knows how many more times to get the same outcome. There have to be easier ways to get information about her. He turns to the robed figures he knows are behind him and asks them to teach him. He notices the look each one of them has in their eyes, empty, dead, suitable to be filled up with something else, and he suspects he would see the same look in his own eyes if he were to look in a mirror. And so, where in the canon loop Subaru would be at the mansion, dealing with the witch beast situation and actually getting to know the silver-haired girl he's still obsessed with, Ayamatsu Subaru's Arc 2 is spent living with the witch cult in a secret cave. He learns a lot about the world during this time from the cultists, even though much of it comes from the madman Betelgeuse, and so he of course learns that Satella must not have been the girl's real name. He tells himself that she lied with the name of someone dangerous so that he'd be dissuaded from getting involved with her, to protect him, easily finding an answer to a question the sane Subaru never really figured out the reason for in the main route. But it's not until what would have been the start of Arc 3, when the 5 royal selection candidates are publicly announced, that he learns both that her name is Emilia and that Betelgeuse wants to put her through a trial and then have her die as a martyr to aid in Satella's revival. The scene that we see next is a confrontation that Subaru prepared for through many, many deaths, over 400 in fact, where he kills Betelgeuse to prevent him from doing such an unacceptable thing, even though during his time learning how to kill him, Subaru has spent so much time with Betelgeuse that he's actually come to consider him his friend. During his trial and error phase, Subaru discovered that he was himself capable of contracting with spirits, and this meant that Betelgeuse was able to possess his body. To avoid this happening, Subaru formed a contract with a minor fire spirit, much like the little spirit of Julius's that he borrowed to kill Betelgeuse in the canon Arc 3. It's not explained how Subaru managed to kill himself and return by death in any trial loops where Betelgeuse did manage to possess him, but as with many things left off page in this story, there are various ways that could have played out. Having killed Betelgeuse, Subaru makes contact with Roswell, it now being a matter of public record that he's Emilia's backer, and he tells him to make sure Emilia gets the credit for killing the Sin Archbishop. Roswell accepts easily, and Subaru is actually disgusted by how eager he is to go along with this, even though it is what he wants. Emilia's popularity grows, and Roswell accepts Subaru's alliance from the shadows. Emilia doesn't know about him and doesn't meet him. But the events of the Canon Loops Arc 3 are moving forward, and Crush's faction have launched their expedition to subjugate the White Whale. Without Subaru's information, the help of Anastasia's faction that Subaru orchestrated, or Subaru's assistance in the battle, the attempt is a catastrophic failure, with both Wilhelm and Crush killed and erased from the world's memory by the whale's fog. Subaru is happy that this took the favourite in the royal selection out of the picture, but it irritates him that only he can remember that Crush ever existed. He didn't know her in this route, however, and only ever saw her as another obstacle for Emilia, so he feels no sorrow, not for Crush in dying, or for the knight with the title of Blue, the greatest water magic user and healer in the land, Felix Argyle. Felix's mind can't cope with Crush's existence having been erased. She was such a big part of his history and purpose in life that nothing makes sense to him anymore, and he's left a broken, muttering wreck. Subaru can see many uses for this person, skilled as he is, and in a situation where he's very suggestible. It takes more loops of trial and error, with Felix locked away in a dungeon, for Subaru to find a way to brainwash Felix into seeing him as his master, without Felix managing to kill himself first. But eventually he achieves this, and gains him as his pawn, calling him Blue, a title which holds a lot of prestige in Lagunica, in a mockery of his former knightly position. Now we'll be going to the scene with significant Arc 5 spoilers, so please skip ahead to the time shown on the screen if you don't want to hear them. Having hired Elsa to help him, Subaru has come to take on another of the witch cult's Sin Archbishops, having done sufficient preparation and research, as is his wont, to know the trick to Regulus Cornelius, the Archbishop of Greed's seeming invincibility. Regulus, as we discover in a very different battle in Arc 5 of the main route, is unable to be killed because he forces his wives, who are really just slaves he keeps in fear for their lives and sometimes kills on a whim, to hold his heart inside them. As long as the wives are alive, he can't be hurt, let alone die. There's a bit more to how his abilities work, but it's really just the wives that we need to be concerned with in this scene. Regulus's mansion is burning, perhaps thanks to some help from Subaru's unnamed little fire spirit, and Elsa has caught up with him, using her kukri blades to prune him like a bonsai tree, cutting off his arms and legs and throwing his mangled but still living torso outside, where Subaru is waiting to hear his last words, or rather to gloat to him about just how it's possible that he, Regulus Cornelius, is about to die. Subaru has already killed all of Regulus's wives, but this, unlike many of the other things Subaru does in this route, was not murder. The wives agreed to die in the fire as a means of killing Regulus, in a darker version of what happens in the main route between the wives and Emilia. After learning how he was defeated, Regulus's limbless torso is hoisted up on Elsa's blades, driven through his chest, in what would be a pretty good Mortal Kombat fatality. He's tossed into a weaker part of the fire at Subaru's request, and Subaru and Elsa stand there and watch him slowly burn to death. And now we're back to the spoiler-free scenes, and there won't be any more spoilers now for the rest of the video. The next scene sees Subaru in a bar where he and the puppet that used to be Felix are about to see the impeccable knight Julius Juculius die. Subaru states that he decided to kill Julius because it would weaken Anastasia's faction, and be easier than killing Anastasia herself, who's always surrounded by guards, though his reasoning is thin and he knows it. With enough trial and error, he's been able to kill far tougher opponents than Anastasia, who doesn't use magic or have any divine protections. Rather, it seems like Subaru simply wants to kill Julius, because his righteous, knightly existence irritates him, and if he can do it as part of his cause, all the better. As Julius dies, seemingly the victim of some unspecified poison or magic, it isn't Subaru he's distressed by, however, but his former best friend Felix, now a brainwashed, zombified doll begging for Subaru's approval for killing Julius, which Subaru gives him, literally in the form of head pats. It's not just Felix whose fate has been changed drastically by Subaru taking the Ayamatsu route, however. With the murder accomplished, the guy Subaru's hired for cleanup duty arrives. A guy with grey hair who claims, despite the work he's here to do, to be a merchant. This is Otto Suin. Where Subaru never intervened in his life during the events of Arc 3, Otto ended up a debt slave working for Russell Fellow, a man we see briefly in Season 1. Subaru's turn to the dark side isn't directly responsible for Otto's fate here. He simply hired someone through Russell to clean up his crime scenes, but we see just how different the life of this character becomes if events take a different path. And rather than becoming the Emilia camp's Minister of Internal Affairs, Otto basically has to become one of those guys from Pulp Fiction who clean up blood and corpses. Otto and Subaru do not exchange names. It seems better that way, considering the shadiness of it all. And as Otto says, it's not like they can become friends. But they do exchange some banter, and Subaru gets the feeling that if things were different, he perhaps wouldn't have minded being friends with this depressed man. It's perhaps a little on the nose, but it's another sign that Subaru has lost things he would never know he should have had on this route. He can't be friends with Otto. He doesn't even meet Rem. Emilia is only a goal to him who will never care for him, and as far as we can tell, owing to Subaru having already done enough for Roswell to raise Emilia's reputation, the sanctuary situation never happens, so other people like Garfield and even Echidnut never feature in Subaru's life at all. The man who we are used to seeing trying desperately to save everybody now has nobody else to save, and is using the same ability towards only one goal. And yet, it's harder, and it costs him many, many more deaths. It took thousands of deaths, in fact, to reach the final loop, and the end of the road for Ayamatsu Subaru. No matter what he tried, there was just no way to kill the last person he needed to cement himself as the ultimate villain, and Emilia who would defeat him as the ultimate hero. Reinhard is just too powerful. The conclusion Subaru ultimately reached was that he would never be able to kill the man, and so instead he would kill his name. He would create a catastrophe so great that Reinhard would be powerless to do anything about it, destroying the faith people had in the strongest, greatest of knights. And so Subaru has turned the capital and beyond it the whole of the kingdom into a fiery hellscape. Everything around him is ablaze, and countless innocent people will die. Subaru, just a human, having caused a catastrophe for Lagunica second only to the great calamity of 400 years ago. It has cost Subaru not only many, many deaths, but also the lives of all of those who could be called allies, including Felix and Elsa. But now he's almost ready to present Emilia with the moment to kill him, and be the hero to whoever survives this twisted disaster. But first, Reinhard appears to face him. Subaru tells Reinhard what he's done, that all of this was to kill Reinhard's name, and Reinhard looks at him with a pure hatred Subaru had never imagined this noble knight could even experience. Subaru finds himself confessing the reality of his hatred for Reinhard, however, in tears for the first time since the first day in this world, when he first saw Reinhard's strength. He confesses how he envied Reinhard, how he wanted to be him, but Reinhard dismisses his words as worthless. Tapei's narration praises Reinhard the hero for being correct here, for always being correct. Natsuki Subaru is, and has been for a long time, an unempathizable madman, the author tells us outright. Reinhard has no intention of drawing any sword, less still of drawing his legendary dragon sword to face Subaru. The difference in strength is obvious, and Reinhard will only need his hands. But before he can engage Subaru in what will certainly end in another death, Elsa, who Subaru thought dead, appears on the scene, alive and ready to fight Reinhard one last time of her own. It seems Subaru knew less about his longest-standing accomplice than he might have thought. For a moment, Subaru is transfixed watching the fight Elsa went into so jubilantly, despite surely knowing it would end in her demise, but then swiftly realises that he's been gifted the chance to escape here, to run to Emilia and to end all of this. I described how he travelled to where Emilia is in the first spoiler section of the video. But as he's on his way, he feels the complexity of all of the emotions associated with going towards this final encounter, though it's not so much a combination of excitement, nerves and fear as something closer to relief or maybe resignation. And then there she is. She's never met him and never been told his name, so she addresses him only as villain. She injured him as he arrives, and he thinks his shoulder may be dislocated, but the pain doesn't register. He knows he simply has to say what he needs to tell her without losing it, and then all of this will be over. He says her name and is moved by how little she's changed since that first time he met her. The only time, a time that exists only in Subaru's memory, as she is confused by how he could know her, racking her brain for any memory that he might appear in. But Puck appears and tells her to ignore anything he has to say. He asks Subaru how he intends to pay for what he's done, and when Subaru answers that he has every intention of paying, Puck is suspicious as to what this could mean. But Subaru holds out his arms in a gesture of non-aggression. For this final meeting, he's wearing his tracksuit rather than the witch cult robes he's worn for the rest of these events. He's saved this, the outfit he was wearing when he arrived in this world and met Emilia, always planning to wear it when he was reunited with her at the end. He prefaces the explanation he so badly wants to give Emilia by saying that it will just be the ramblings of a madman, and relaxes into blurting out what he's done, the calamity he's created so that she can stop it, so that she can do something none of the other remaining candidates could rival. All she has to do is kill him and she will get to rule, and her wish will come true. Emilia is caught between failing to understand his lunacy and abject horror that this man she has no memory of could have committed such atrocities and could be claiming he did it for her. Distraught, Emilia begins to cry. But Subaru knew that Emilia wouldn't understand, that she would never have asked for this, and that she would cry. He knew from the start that he was wrong. He was erring all the way through this. But this Subaru, Ayamatsu Subaru, believes that there was no other way. He sacrificed everybody, even the people he'd made strange alliances bordering on friendship with, and now, as Emilia asks again who he is, he's about to sacrifice himself, and this time for good. "I'm Natsuki Subaru," he tells her, overjoyed to finally get to introduce himself to Emilia. Witch cult Sin Archbishop of Pride. And as he says these words, he begins to run at her using up all of his resolve, leaving her no choice but to fire at him with her ice magic. Suicide by Emilia. "I'm the man who burned the world, rocked the country, killed the hero, and who you will kill." He falls to the ground, the ice spear through his chest making him collapse before he even reaches Emilia. He closes his eyes, waiting for death. But he hears Emilia just repeating and repeating the same question. Why? She's kneeling beside him now, and one of her tears lands on his face. He opens his eyes, life fading from him, and with only enough time to give one answer, even though he knows she's asking a lot of questions with her whys. All he says is, "I love you." Now Subaru can finally die. He finds himself in the dark place he always goes to before returning, and he senses a presence that has always been there, but which has never gotten close and identified itself before. He feels love and welcome from this being, but he acknowledges that it's not the one he loves, that his love is now in another place, set by him on a course where her wish will come true. But here he accepts the presence, and this is where this Subaru's journey ends. Ayamatsu Subaru has died for the last time. The final words of the story are, "Even if you reject me, I will never forget you." So, that was Ayamatsu, and as I'm sure you can see, there are lots of things to think about in this if route. I've actually written the analysis video alongside writing the script for this one, and it is the longest script I've ever written, so there's a huge amount to dissect and speculate about that we can get from this story, and I'll have that up once I've edited it. So unless you're watching this right after it was uploaded, you should be able to watch that now if you're interested in taking a deep dive into what Ayamatsu can tell us about the characters and world in the canon ReZero story. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a lot of fun to work on. If you did like it, please hit the like button and subscribe if you want to see more ReZero content. I'm quite a new channel, and so I really appreciate the love, though I do already have plenty of ReZero and other anime content that you can check out now. Given my day job is as a harem fiction author, I think it might be kind of fun to look at the Lust If next. Yes, it is the worst one, and Tappei really only wrote it as a joke, but I know my stuff when it comes to writing the lewd harem stuff properly, and I think it might be fun to look at it from that perspective. Incidentally, if you want to check out my books, there is a link to my author page on Amazon in the description, though I do have to warn you, they are for people of culture, and so don't read them if you're of a sweet and innocent persuasion or too young for that sort of thing. I have no idea why you would be too young for my books and not too young for ReZero, but hey, I have to cover myself. Okay, thanks for watching, and I really hope to see you again soon.